Don't move, hands where I can see them. The man freezes with a paper grocery bag pressed against his chest, both arms wrapped around it the way you hold something you don't want to drop. He turns his head slowly toward the voice. There are two officers. One has already moved to his left, cutting off the space between him and his front door. The other is standing at the edge of the driveway with one hand resting on his belt. I live here. Sir, I need you to set the bag down and step away from the vehicle. I'm unloading groceries from my own car in my own driveway. I'd like to know what's happening. We've had a report. Set the bag down. He sets it down, slowly. The bag tips slightly on the asphalt and a can of black beans rolls 2 inches toward the front tire. He straightens back up with his hands visible, fingers spread, palms forward, the posture of someone who has thought about this moment before. Not this specific moment, but a version of it. Some version of it. Because when you are a black man in America, some version of this moment lives in the back of your mind the way a weather forecast lives in the body of someone with an old injury. You feel it before it arrives. Across the quiet cul-de-sac of Pembroke Court in the Lakeview Heights neighborhood of Indianapolis, Indiana, on a Sunday afternoon in August, 3 neighbors have appeared on their porches. A woman is standing at her kitchen window. A teenage girl has stopped her bicycle at the entrance to the court and is watching from 30 feet away with the stillness of someone who understands exactly what she is looking at. What happened in the next 18 minutes on that driveway would trigger a federal civil rights investigation, produce a legal filing that one law professor described as a masterclass in prosecutorial precision turned inward on the system itself, cost the city of Indianapolis $1.8 million, and force a conversation at the Indianapolis Metro Police Department that the department had been deferring for 11 years. Every single second of it was recorded. Before we go any further, where are you watching this from right now? Drop your city or country in the comments below. If this is your first time here and this story already has your attention, hit subscribe before you forget, because it is about to get significantly more remarkable. You will want to stay for all of it. His name is Marcus Damon Thill. He is 46 years old. He is an assistant United States attorney for the Southern District of Indiana, where he has worked for 14 years. And before those 14 years, he spent 4 years as a deputy prosecutor in Marion County, and before that, 3 years as an associate at one of Indianapolis's oldest litigation firms, where he was the first black attorney hired at the associate level in the firm's 62-year history. He has been a lawyer for 21 years. He has never lost the awareness of what that means in a room where it is unexpected. Marcus grew up in Gary, Indiana, in a neighborhood that produced either grit or casualties, usually both. His father worked the line at a steel finishing plant for 30 years and coached his son's youth basketball team on weekday evenings with the same focused intensity he brought to everything, which is to say, completely. His mother was a middle school history teacher who kept a running list on the refrigerator of every black lawyer, judge, and lawmaker in Indiana history, and updated it when Marcus came home with new information from the school library. He came home with new information frequently. He had understood by the time he was 10 that the list was a kind of argument, that it existed to prove something was possible. He decided early that he was going to be on a list like that someday. He graduated from Indiana University with a double major in political science and African American studies. He finished in the top 8% of his class at Indiana University Mora School of Law. He passed the bar at 25, started at the litigation firm at 26, and was at the U.S. Attorney's Office by 32, recruited specifically for his work on a wire fraud case that had resulted in a 23-count conviction against a regional financial services company and restitution orders totaling $67 million. The USAO supervisor who recruited him told him in the interview that she had read his trial brief 3 times. He asked her what she thought. She said, "I think you should be working for us." He said he agreed. In 14 years as a federal prosecutor, Marcus has tried 41 cases to verdict. He has won 38 of them. He has secured convictions in cases involving public corruption, organized financial fraud, trafficking networks, and civil rights violations, including 2 cases in which the defendants were law enforcement officers. Those 2 cases are not a coincidence, and Marcus does not pretend they are. He pursued them with the same methodical precision he brings to every case. He prepared every witness. He read every file. He won both. He is not married. A long engagement ended 6 years ago in circumstances he describes simply as incompatible timelines, with the neutrality of a man who has made peace with something. He is close with his family. He calls his mother every Sunday morning without exception, before he does anything else. He visits his father, who has been in assisted living for 3 years following a stroke, every Saturday afternoon when court schedule permits. His colleagues describe him as the person in the office most likely to read a filing twice before responding to an email about it. He is methodical. He is thorough. He is, by every professional measure available, exactly the kind of person the law is supposed to protect. On the Sunday afternoon this happened, he had driven to the Kroger on East 86th Street and loaded 6 canvas bags and 2 paper bags of groceries into the back of his Audi. He was thinking, on the drive home, about a suppression motion he needed to file by Thursday. The evidentiary questions were interesting. A Fourth Amendment search issue, which carries its own specific texture when you are a black man who has spent 21 years arguing Fourth Amendment cases in court. He parked in his driveway on Pembroke Court, where he has lived for 7 years, and opened the trunk. He had made 2 trips from the trunk to the front door already. He was on his 3rd trip, a paper bag balanced against his chest, when he heard the cruiser pull up. Officer Joel Stannick had been with the Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department for 8 years. He was 36 years old. He had, in 8 years, accumulated 16 formal complaints. 16. In a department where the median officer career produces fewer than 3 complaints in total. Of his 16 complaints, 13 involved black residents. 11 of those 13 occurred in residential settings, driveways, front yards, building lobbies, apartment parking lots. The pattern is not subtle when you lay it flat. It reads like a map of the same decision made the same way, over and over, in the same kinds of spaces, involving the same kinds of people. In the summer of 2020, Stannick had responded to a suspicious person call on Maple Crest Drive and approached a 38-year-old man named Darnell Whitmore who was mowing his own lawn. Stannick told him the call reported a man who didn't appear to belong in the neighborhood. Darnell Whitmore had lived on Maple Crest Drive for 11 years. He had bought the mower he was using at the Home Depot 4 blocks away, and the receipt was in the garage. The complaint was filed, reviewed, and dismissed after a determination that Stannick had acted within department guidelines for responding to community calls. Stannick received no additional training. In the spring of 2021, Stannick had stopped a 51-year-old woman named Gloria Asant in the parking lot of a condominium complex on North Pennsylvania Street, telling her the building's management had reported unauthorized vehicles. Gloria Asant owned a unit in the building. She had owned it for 4 years. Her parking space number was printed on a laminated card hanging from her rearview mirror. The complaint was reviewed and dismissed. Stannick received no additional training. In the fall of 2022, Stannick had detained a 29-year-old man named Troy Ellison outside a townhouse on Meridian Hills Boulevard for 11 minutes, citing a neighbor's report of someone who didn't look like they lived on the block. Troy Ellison had moved into his townhouse 8 months prior. His name was on the lease, his mailbox, and the package sitting on his front step when Stannick arrived. The complaint was reviewed and dismissed. Stannick received no additional training. In 8 years, no complaint against Joel Stannick had ever resulted in anything beyond review and dismissal. His supervisor described him in a 2022 performance evaluation as proactive, a word that, in that context, would come to require some unpacking. His partner that Sunday, Officer Renata Kowalski, had been on the force for 3 years. She had 0 complaints. She would later cooperate fully with investigators. The pattern was clear. Every single complaint pointed in the same direction, but Joel Stannick remained on residential patrol. Pembroke Court is a small cul-de-sac of 11 homes in Lakeview Heights, a neighborhood in the northern part of Indianapolis that sits in the particular demographic geography of a city in transition. The kind of neighborhood where longtime residents and newer arrivals exist in close proximity, and where the social texture of that proximity is not always comfortable. The homes are well maintained. The driveways are short. The houses sit close enough together that someone standing on a front porch can hear a conversation happening in the next driveway without trying. Marcus has lived at number 7 for 7 years. He knows his neighbors, most of them. He waves to the Garcias at number 3 when he checks his mail. He helped the elderly man at number 9 carry a sofa up his front steps 2 summers ago. He has attended 2 block association meetings, brought food to one of them, and served on the informal planning committee for the neighborhood's 4th of July gathering last year. He does not know which neighbor called 911 that Sunday. He has said he prefers it that way. Knowing, he said, would make it harder to live on the block without carrying something heavy. The 911 call was recorded. The caller, whose identity is protected in the public record, though not in the sealed investigative file, described a suspicious black male in the driveway of 7 Pembroke Court, who was repeatedly going back and forth from a vehicle to the house and appeared to be casing the property. The words casing the property are in the transcript. Marcus's own property, his own driveway, his own groceries. The call came in at 2:14 p.m. on a Sunday. It was sunny. It was 81 degrees. All of this is in the record. Stannick and Kowalski arrive at 2:19 p.m. The bodycam footage shows Stannick stepping out of the cruiser first, moving to the left side of the driveway before Marcus has fully processed that the vehicle has stopped. Kowalski exits from the passenger side and positions herself near the car, but her body language is different from Stannick's from the first second. She is present but not committed. She is watching. Marcus has the paper bag in both arms. He turns at the sound of the door. "Don't move, hands where I can see them." He freezes. He sets the bag down. He raises his hands. "I live here." "Sir, step away from the vehicle and keep your hands up." Marcus takes 2 steps to his right, away from the Audi. He is in his own driveway. His front door is 12 feet behind him. His keys are in his right pants pocket. Through the front window, the lights in his living room are on. "Officer, I'd like to understand what's happening. What was the nature of the call?" "We received a report of suspicious activity at this address." "I've been unloading groceries from my car. I live at this address. I've lived here for 7 years. Can I show you my ID?" "Keep your hands up." "I need to reach into my pocket for my ID. I'm informing you before I do it. I'm going to move my right hand slowly toward my right front pocket." "Don't reach for anything." Marcus keeps his hands up. The can of black beans is still sitting near the front tire. One of the canvas bags is on the front step. A carton of orange juice is visible at the top of it. Stannick moves toward him. "Sir, I'm going to need you to turn around and place your hands behind your back." Marcus's voice does not change register. It is the voice he uses in a courtroom when opposing counsel has just said something he is about to dismantle carefully, measured, clear, each word selected. "I have not been told what law I am suspected of violating. I have not been given the opportunity to identify myself. I have not consented to any search or seizure. I am advising you right now that I am invoking my 4th Amendment right against unreasonable seizure and my 5th Amendment right against self-incrimination. I will cooperate fully with a lawful process. This is not a lawful process." The woman at the kitchen window across the cul-de-sac has now come outside onto her front step. The 3 neighbors on their porches haven't moved. The teenage girl with the bicycle has set it down and is standing with her phone up. She is not a news photographer. She is a 15-year-old girl who has grown up in this neighborhood and knows exactly what she is looking at, because she has seen it before and her parents have told her what to do when she sees it. She holds the phone steady. Quick question for everyone watching. Do you think officers responding to 911 calls in residential areas should be required to verify a person's connection to the property before initiating any detention? Tell me what you think in the comments. Stannick circles behind Marcus and reaches for his wrists. You're being detained for investigation of suspicious activity. That is not a legally cognizable charge. Suspicious activity is not a criminal offense. You need reasonable articulable suspicion of a specific crime. What crime? Stannick doesn't answer. He brings Marcus's wrists together behind his back. The cuffs go on. They are tight enough that Marcus makes a brief, involuntary sound that is not a word, not quite a gasp, just the small audible acknowledgement of pain that the body produces before the mind can stop it. He stands up straight immediately. From the steps of number 5 across the court, a man named Gerald Hutchins, 63 years old, retired teacher, 12-year resident of Pembroke Court, calls out in a loud, clear voice. He lives there. I know that man. He lives at that house. His voice is not panicked. It is the voice of someone who has decided that silence is no longer an option. Stannick tells him to stay back. Gerald stays where he is, but he doesn't stay quiet. I am not approaching you. I am standing on my own property telling you that you are making a mistake. I want that on the record. It is on the record. The bodycam catches every word. Marcus, hands cuffed behind him in his own driveway, orange juice visible on his front step, can of black beans by his tire, looks straight ahead and says, in a voice so quiet it almost doesn't reach the bodycam microphone, "You're going to want to run my credentials before this goes any further. I'm advising you as clearly as I can." Stannick tells him he will have the opportunity to provide information at the station. Marcus says nothing else. He is placed in the back of the cruiser. Officer Kowalski, before she gets back in the vehicle, takes one long look across the cul-de-sac. Gerald Hutchins is still standing on his step. The teenage girl still has her phone up. Kowalski looks at the grocery bag on the front step, the canvas bag with the orange juice, the one remaining paper bag in the trunk of the Audi, leaning against the spare tire. She gets in the car. At the Northside precinct, Marcus is placed in a processing room. He has been calm through every step, the walk to the cruiser, the drive, the entry into the building. Calm with the specific quality of someone who is not suppressing anything, who is not managing himself. Calm the way a structure is calm, because the underlying architecture holds. He asks twice for the opportunity to show his identification. The second request is addressed to a desk officer named Sergeant Linda Prewitt, who is doing intake paperwork at a counter nearby. She looks at Stannick. Stannick is finishing his own paperwork. He waves a hand in a gesture that says, "In a minute." Prewitt looks at Marcus. Something in the specific quality of his stillness, the posture, the diction, the way he has used the phrase legally cognizable in a sentence gives her pause. "Go ahead and run his ID now," she says. It is not a question. It is a sergeant's instruction. Stannick crosses to the terminal. He enters the information from Marcus's driver's license, which has been removed from his wallet during intake. The Federal Employee Database returns results in under 90 seconds. Marcus Damon Thill, Assistant United States Attorney, Southern District of Indiana, United States Department of Justice. Employee ID, Security Clearance Level, Bar Number. Office address at the Birch Bay Federal Building and U.S. Courthouse, 46 East Ohio Street, Indianapolis. 14 years of service. Active status. Stannick looks at the screen. The room is very quiet. Officer Kowalski, standing in the doorway, reads the screen from where she is. She closes her eyes for the length of one breath. When she opens them, she looks at Marcus with an expression that contains something close to an apology, not the institutional kind that lawyers craft, but the human kind that appears on a face before there has been time to stop it. Sergeant Prewitt reads the screen. She sets her pen down with the careful deliberateness of someone who needs a moment before they speak. She looks at Stannick. He is still looking at the screen with the fixed expression of a man who is watching the floor of a situation he was certain about give way entirely beneath him. Marcus, hands still cuffed behind him, speaks. "I'd like the cuffs removed, please. I'd like my property returned. And I'd like the names and badge numbers of both officers who responded to this call, the name of the supervisor currently on duty, and documentation of the 911 call that initiated this contact. I'll be submitting a formal complaint and a referral to the DOJ Civil Rights Division by end of business tomorrow. I am telling you this now so that none of the relevant records are inadvertently unavailable when they are requested." He says all of this in the same tone that he uses for opening statements, not raised, not trembling, not angry, or rather, not performing calm over anger, which is a different thing. He is simply clear. He is a federal prosecutor, and he is telling a room full of police officers exactly what is about to happen to them, and every person in that room understands it, and the cuffs come off. He rolls his right wrist once, then his left. He picks up his phone from the intake tray. He calls his mother back. She had called during the drive to the precinct, and he had not been able to answer. When she picks up, he says, "I'm fine. I'll explain later. I need to make another call. I love you." Then he hangs up and calls the DOJ duty line. Was the city right to wait for a formal investigation before making any public statement? Or should the mayor have called Marcus Thill directly that same evening? Let me know what you think should have happened in the first 24 hours. The Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department's first statement, released Monday morning, said that officers had responded to community concern in good faith, and that the department is committed to reviewing all interactions to ensure they meet the highest standards of professional conduct. The statement did not acknowledge that the man who had been handcuffed in his driveway was a federal prosecutor. It did not use the word mistake. It did not use Marcus Thill's name. It expressed commitment to review in the passive voice. A review will be conducted, with no timeline, no named reviewer, and no stated scope. Marcus's attorney, Deborah Okonkwo, a civil rights litigator who had previously secured 2 landmark settlements against Indiana law enforcement agencies, released a statement Monday afternoon that was 47 words long. "My client, a 14-year veteran federal prosecutor with the U.S. Department of Justice, was handcuffed in his own driveway while unloading groceries, based on a 911 call that described him as suspicious. He had committed no offense. He was never charged. The relevant documentation will speak for itself." The bodycam footage was obtained by a local television station Tuesday morning through an expedited public records request. It aired Tuesday evening. By Wednesday morning, it had been viewed 31 million times across platforms. The clip that circulated most was not the handcuffing, though that circulated too. It was the quiet. The 47 seconds between Stannick reading the screen and the cuffs coming off, during which no one in the room spoke, and Marcus Thill stood with his hands behind his back and waited. 31 million people watched a federal prosecutor stand in a police precinct processing room, cuffed in his own Sunday grocery clothes, and wait with complete composure for a system to catch up to a fact it should have never needed to discover. Legal analysts across multiple platforms noted that the case had an unusual structural quality. The person who had been detained was not only familiar with civil rights law, but had spent 14 years enforcing federal law in the same jurisdiction. One analyst on a national legal commentary program said, with visible discomfort, "The Department of Justice is the agency that prosecutes cases like this one. The victim in this case works for the Department of Justice." That is not lost on anyone. It was not lost on the DOJ. The Civil Rights Division opened an investigation within 72 hours. Separately, Marcus filed a civil rights action in the Southern District of Indiana, in the same courthouse where he works, before a judge who is his professional colleague, a recusal process that added procedural complexity but did not change the underlying facts, which were documented in 4 bodycam recordings, 6 civilian phone recordings, the 911 call log, the precinct intake log, and the sworn statement of Gerald Hutchins, retired teacher, 12-year resident of Pembroke Court, who wrote his account out by hand on 2 pages of legal paper and delivered it to Marcus's attorney in person. Stannick's attorney issued a statement arguing that his client had responded appropriately to a reported community concern and had no reason prior to database confirmation to know the subject's occupation. When a reporter asked whether the subject's occupation was the relevant variable, as opposed to, for instance, whether he had committed any crime, the attorney declined to follow up. The DOJ investigation ran 13 weeks. Its findings documented Stannick's 16 prior complaints in full, with demographic analysis showing that 13 of the 16 involved black residents in residential settings. It found that the department's threshold for supervisory intervention, set at 7 complaints within a 36-month period for automatic review, had never been triggered for Stannick because his complaints were spread across a longer period, a bureaucratic gap that the department's own internal audit had flagged in 2021 and never corrected. It found that 2 supervisors had reviewed Stannick's complaint file at different points and produced memos recommending monitoring, and that neither memo had resulted in any change to Stannick's patrol assignment or supervision level. It found that the 911 call system had no mechanism for logging or reviewing repeat callers from the same address or same neighborhood, meaning that a pattern of racially motivated calls could accumulate without any supervisory visibility. The investigation also reviewed the calling party's prior 911 activity. That information is in the sealed record. Stannick was terminated. The Indiana Law Enforcement Training Board reviewed his certification. He is no longer certified to serve as a law enforcement officer in Indiana. His attorney's statement following the termination was 5 sentences long and said nothing that has been repeated since. Officer Renata Kowalski was not disciplined. She received a commendation for her cooperation with the investigation, which she and her attorney noted publicly was not an outcome she had sought, but which the investigating body determined was appropriate given the specificity and consistency of her account. The city of Indianapolis settled with Marcus Thill for $1.8 million. Marcus had declined an earlier offer of $750,000. His attorney's public statement regarding the rejection was brief. The number was never the primary issue. The settlement required the Indianapolis Metro Police Department to implement an automatic supervisory review triggered at any officer's 4th complaint within a 24-month period, regardless of whether complaints fell in consecutive years. It required the creation of a civilian review board with independent investigative authority, not advisory capacity, investigative authority, funded at a level guaranteed in the settlement terms for a minimum of 5 years. It required a demographic audit of all 911 calls routed to residential patrol over the preceding 7 years, with findings reported publicly. It required annual implicit bias assessment integrated into the department's existing performance review cycle, with documentation of results maintained in personnel files. It required the department to implement a repeat caller review system in the 911 dispatch infrastructure. A technological addition that the department had been informed was necessary in that 2021 audit and had not implemented. It also required a formal public apology. The chief of police delivered it at a city council session in October, reading from a prepared statement that acknowledged specifically that an assistant United States attorney had been unlawfully detained in his own driveway based on a call that described ordinary lawful activity, that the department had failed to prevent this outcome despite prior opportunities to address the relevant officer's documented pattern, and that this failure was the department's responsibility. Marcus was present at the council session. He sat in the third row. He did not speak. When it was over, he drove home to Pembroke Court, pulled into his driveway, and carried in the groceries he had bought that morning. He donated $600,000 of the settlement to Indiana Legal Services, which provides free civil legal assistance to low-income residents of Indiana, with a specific allocation to expand their housing and civil rights practice areas. He donated $300,000 to the Julian Center in Indianapolis, which supports survivors of domestic abuse, a cause his mother has volunteered with for 20 years. The remainder established an endowment at Indiana University Mora School of Law for a clinical program in civil rights law, specifically designed to give law students hands-on experience in cases that would otherwise go unrepresented. His name is on the endowment. He said it was for his parents. He said his father built things with his hands for 30 years, and his mother kept a list on the refrigerator, and this was the shape the list had taken. He said it quietly, in the remarks he gave at the endowment announcement, and then he sat down. The mark on Marcus's right wrist from the cuffs faded within a week. The mark he carries that doesn't fade is harder to name. It lives in a specific recalibration that happened in the cruiser on the way to the precinct. A moment when the suppression motion he had been thinking about all afternoon, the Fourth Amendment search issue with its interesting evidentiary texture, became something different. Became personal in a way it had always been personal, but that he had kept at a certain professional distance. The distance collapsed in the back of that cruiser. He has said this once. In a law review article he wrote 8 months after the incident, in language that is precise and measured and does not perform anything. He said, "I have spent 14 years arguing that the Fourth Amendment applies equally to everyone. I have believed this. I continue to believe it. What the driveway taught me is that belief and experience are not the same thing, and that closing the gap between them is not a legal problem. It is a human one." His mother, when she heard the full account, was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "You called me first." He told her he always called her first. She said she knew. Then she said, "They put cuffs on my son in his driveway." She said it the way you say a true thing that you cannot make smaller by saying it out loud. He didn't try to make it smaller. He just said, "Yes, and it's going to matter. I'm going to make sure it matters." He has done that. Gerald Hutchins, retired teacher, 12-year resident, the man who stood on his step and said what needed to be said, received a handwritten note from Marcus 3 weeks after the incident. It was 4 sentences long. Gerald has kept it. He showed it to a reporter once but declined to share its contents. He said, "It was between him and me, but I'll tell you this, it was the kind of thing you keep." Marcus Thill has been stopped before. Not always in uniform, not always in his driveway, but stopped in the specific way that is not about traffic and not about crime, and is about something that has no legal name because the law was not designed to name it. He was followed through a department store in Carmel, Indiana in 2018 by a loss prevention employee who later said he fit a general description. He does not know the description. He was never told. He was stopped at a hotel lobby in Columbus, Ohio in 2020, and asked for room confirmation before the front desk had even looked at the name on his reservation. He was pulled over on I-70 in 2019 and told his registration was due. It was not due, and released after 11 minutes with no ticket and no explanation for why the stop had lasted 11 minutes. He filed no complaint in any of these instances. He went home. He went back to work. He prepared his next case. He won. What makes the Pembroke Court incident different is not the driveway. It is not the groceries. It is not even the cuffs, though the cuffs are on tape and the tape has been seen 31 million times. What makes it different is the compounding of it: 1 man, 1 pattern, 16 documented prior incidents, 4 prior supervisory memos, 2 prior audit flags, and a system that looked at all of that evidence the way a prosecutor looks at evidence and chose, each time not to act on it. Marcus Thill spends his professional life making the argument that patterns constitute proof, that a documented series of choices reveals intent, that the absence of intervention is itself a decision. He has made this argument in 41 trials and won 38 of them. He made it from the back of a police cruiser, in his own clothes, smelling like the grocery store, while a suppression motion waited on his desk at home, and a can of black beans sat in his driveway next to his front tire. The settlement changes some of what comes next. The oversight board changes some of what comes next. The demographic audit of 7 years of 911 calls, which is currently ongoing and whose preliminary findings have not yet been released publicly, may change more. These are not small things. They are the result of a man who knew exactly what had happened to him and had spent 21 years building the tools to respond to it, and who used those tools fully, without hesitation, and without a single moment of the deference that the system had been counting on. But the question that the settlement does not answer, the question that sits in the space between the legal victory and the human reality, is what happens on the next Sunday afternoon in the next cul-de-sac in the next city, where the person in the driveway is not a federal prosecutor, where the person does not have 14 years of constitutional law practice, and a civil rights litigator on speed dial, and a professional history that makes the database screen go white with clearance levels, where the person has groceries and a front door 12 feet away and hands raised and a voice that is saying calmly, "I live here, I live here, I live here," and no credential to make anyone stop. That person exists. That person has always existed. They are not in the national coverage. They do not have settlements that restructure departmental policy. They have complaints that are reviewed and dismissed and filed and forgotten. They have the bruise from the cuffs and the thing in their chest that doesn't fully leave, and the specific adjustment they make to their own behavior when they pull into their own driveway from now on, the extra moment they sit in the car, the awareness they carry into what should be the most ordinary moment in the world. Marcus Thill's case matters because of what it changed. It matters more because of what it revealed. The system that allowed Joel Stannick to walk up to that driveway was not a broken system. It was a functioning one, functioning exactly as it had been allowed to function. Complaint after complaint, memo after memo, flag after flag, for 8 years. The question is not whether we can fix a broken system. The question is whether we have the will to change a system that is, in this specific and terrible way, working as designed. That is not a legal question. It is not a policy question. It is a question about what we are willing to see when the evidence is in front of us, and what we are willing to do with what we see. Marcus Thill asked that question in a police precinct processing room with his wrists behind his back. He is asking it still, every day, in a courthouse on East Ohio Street, in a city that owes him more than a settlement figure, in a country that is still deciding whether it means what it says about equal protection under the law. We should be deciding that with him, not for him, with him. If you stayed for all of that, thank you. These stories don't go away when the coverage stops. They live in what gets changed and what doesn't get changed, and the gap between those two things. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Share this if you think more people need to hear it. And if accountability without exception is something you believe in, subscribe. We're here every week with stories that demand to be told. See you next time.